Please call the roll.
Mayor Coos,
Here.
Mr. McCarthy, Ms. Cummings,
Here.
Mr. Nord,
Here.
Ms. Smith,
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Here.
Mr. Preston.
The governor has issued a disaster declaration related to the public health concerns caused by the statewide COVID-19 pandemic. And as mayor, I have determined that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent because of the risk of exposure to the COVID-19 virus stemming from an indoor gathering, and that the remote meeting is in the best interest of the health, safety, and welfare of the council, staff, and general public. As I said, we're here to get an update from staff on where we are on the proposed underpass project. And Pam, I'll turn it over to you if you have any introductions or anything to say.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. And Mayor and Council, it's our privilege tonight to spend a little time before your regular council meeting to bring you up to speed on where we're at with the underpass project, something that has been a priority for a number of years. And Mr. Aldrich, our Director of Public Works, is going to lead the presentation. We've got a formal presentation of PowerPoint slides, and we can certainly share the slides with you after the meeting this evening. And then with Mr. Aldrich, our representatives from WSP, who have been working with us through phase one. I will ask that council hold questions until after the presentation. I think we have 30 plus slides to go through that go a little bit into the history of how we got to this point and next steps. So I look forward to the conversation, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Aldrich. Oh,
Thanks.
and Mayor, sorry, Wayne, I did want to point out that we do have a couple of public commenters, and those will be occurring at the end of the work session this evening. Mr. Aldrich.
Okay. Thanks, Pam. Yeah, first I'd like to introduce a couple of guests from our team. First, Rick Powell. Rick is our project manager from WSP. And Courtney McCormick, who is our deputy project manager from WSP. Both have considerable experience with railroads, and Courtney is still involved with some of the projects along this corridor. So a lot of great experience with railroads and these types of projects. Eli Lecter is our landscape architect from Ratio Architects. Eli has many responsibilities on the project with the conceptual designs, the landscape architecture, as well as Eli's been handling our accessibility on the project. So Eli's been our expert in that regard. Again, as Ms. Reese said, the slides are numbered. So if you have a question about a particular slide, and after the presentation, we'll try to go back and cover that for you. But we'll go ahead and get started here. I think if I can share my screen. Does everyone see that? Great. Okay. So we'll get started again. This is a update of the project. We've called it various things. Now we're calling it the Uptown Connector because it really connects the north and south sides of the tracks. Talk about a few of our project partners. The first and major partner is United States Department of Transportation. Various agencies we've worked with in the past with the US DOT, but on this project, the primary agency is going to be the Federal Railroad Administration, and they will be our build grant administrators. So that's the agency that we're working through for the US DOT. Also, IDOT, the Illinois Department of Transportation. IDOT, as you may recall, was the project sponsor for the high-speed rail project. They also fund several of the Amtrak trains. So the trains that run within the state, IDOT funds those Amtrak trains. The Illinois Commerce Commission we've worked with for quite some time now. Among other things, the Illinois Commerce Commission regulates rail crossings in the state. They're also in charge of rail crossing safety. So this is a very important project for them. Our host railroad is the Union Pacific Railroad. And then, of course, Amtrak operates the passenger rail service in town. The asterisks on these agencies indicate they're funding partners for our project. The outline of this evening's presentation, you may recall we gave a presentation in November of 2019 on the project status at that point. Some of this presentation this evening will be a review of that, which talked a little bit about alternatives analysis and some of the concept designs. So this evening we'll review some of that. We'll talk about design considerations, concept designs that have been developed, and then preliminary engineering. Towards the end of the presentation, we'll talk about the current funding plan and then next steps. Project history. In January of 2012, Council authorized an agreement with IDOT for a pedestrian overpass, construction of a south platform, and improvements to the old Amtrak station. And in 2013, in the summer of 2013, the Union Pacific Railroad removed the existing at-grade crossing there where the trail crossed, and before that, the old Illinois Central tracks crossed. You might recall that. That was done really on their part. They had full authority to do that. They warned us that they were going to do that. So in that same time period, we, and I think we got some grant help with this from the state, we took the trail and detoured it to Linden Street at that time to provide consistent trail crossing. And then in August of 2014, the council authorized the Uptown plan update to look at the South Uptown area. Sometimes we call that Uptown 2.0. The note at the bottom of this slide, there's a picture of the previously proposed pedestrian overpass. I think it was 2012, in the year 2012, we actually went to council and authorized the foundations to be installed for that north tower of this particular crossing design. It was a good time to put it in. Contractors were mobilized, and we were just about to complete the Gateway Plaza. So at that time, putting the foundations in for that north tower made a lot of sense. Here's a sketch of the Uptown Master Plan, which was done by Farr and Associates. This drawing, of course, shows development potential on the south side of the tracks. And this particular sketch shows an underpass there underneath the railroad tracks. In November of 2015, the council adopted the Uptown Normal Master Plan update. In this process, Farr and Associate actually went through their own alternatives analysis for a crossing there. They looked at bridge designs as well as underpass designs. And the underpass was actually the most favored alternative during that process. So the staff began discussions with our partners, including IDOT and the Union Pacific Railroad, to actually postpone or not to build that pedestrian crossing as proposed, and to give us some time to look at other crossing alternates in that area. Then in April of 2016, the council authorized construction of the south boarding platform, the old Amtrak station improvements without that pedestrian bridge. In May of 2016, the council also authorized modification to the existing IDOT agreement to officially remove that pedestrian bridge from the contract. Then we started really thinking about phase one for conceptual design engineering. So in October 2016, the council authorized a contract with WSP for phase one engineering. And then in December of 2016, this memorandum of understanding between IDOT, Union Pacific, and the town, which again gave us time to look at an alternate crossing for this area, that was executed. Just to review project phases for a project of this type, this is a federally funded project, so we have to go through certain typical procedures with a project like that. One of them you may have heard us talk about is conformance with the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. So every federal project has to go through this. It really protects the human environment as well as the natural environment. I guess that's the easiest way to explain it for me. So we have to study various aspects, and different projects take more study. Ours is relatively simple in that regard. You may have heard other projects have environmental assessments or environmental impact statements. That was not required of our project, but you still have to go through this process. We also did an alternatives analysis, conceptual design, and preliminary engineering in phase 1. Future phases of the project that haven't yet been authorized, they're phase 2. And phase 2 is typically the final design or preparation of construction documents and specifications for the project, as well as the contractor procurement, whether it be through bids or a selection process. And then phase 3 is the construction of the project. Again, talking more about phase 1, the scope of work, we also completed other things outside the top 4 items listed here that I just talked about. Public involvement, there was a public open house meeting in conjunction with the alternatives analysis back in April 2017. And then we also tried virtual public information in 2020. And we'll go over that here in a little bit, but I think was a pretty neat way to get information out to the public, and we can also ask questions via a website and get information from the public that way. So we'll talk more about that later. On this project, a lot of railroad coordination. This was probably the most time-consuming, exhaustive process during the phase 1. Lasted from February of 2018 to really just this last month when we got approvals from the railroad. Again, the railroad wants this project, but yet they really don't want any disruption in the freight traffic. So it really is a difficult subject for them. And also during this period, they went through some major reorganization. They lost a lot of staff and really had a major reorganization. So we had to work through all that period with them. Again, coordinated a lot with the Illinois Commerce Commission, performed site surveys, utility surveys, a geotechnical report that studies the soil conditions, which is necessary for building structures like we will be, and then applied for various grants through the USDOT. And finally, of course, we're successful with the 2019 build grant. Talking about the alternatives analysis part of phase 1, in February of 2017, the council actually approved various study alternatives, project goals, criteria for analysis, and a purpose and needs statement. The purpose and needs statement basically talked about the number of trains increasing through this corridor. Right now we have 10 Amtrak trains and typically 8 to 10 freight trains per day. We haven't done a count recently, but that count we've heard can go up, and the freight trains may get longer and longer, which we're also very concerned about. The average freight train right now takes about 3.5 minutes to clear Linden and Broadway, but we have seen examples of trains that are moving that take as much as 7 minutes to clear these crossings. So that's a concern of ours. Pedestrian and bike traffic has increased over the last several years. Amtrak passengers right now need to take a non-direct route if they're boarding off the south platform. And that does happen on occasion where there's a conflict between trains where Amtrak will need to bring a train in, primarily a southbound train, and load passengers off the south boarding platform. So those folks have a limited amount of time to get to the south platform, and typically they're going via Linden Street or Broadway. The tracks are a perceived barrier through Uptown. So that was a primary part of this project, is to link again the north side of the Uptown to the south side for development, but also to increase mobility for challenged passengers and pedestrians. We won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but this kind of showed our process for analyzing the various alternatives. To the right of this slide, you see various alternatives that were studied during this period. And again, we followed the criteria that was established by the council to analyze these different alternatives. The team then prepared a large matrix, and the results were that really the four lower alternatives, the underpass and underpass with park, were the most favored alternatives. This was subject to a public meeting on April 27th of 2017. There were public comments received during the meeting, and then we opened it up to a 30-day comment period afterwards. So the public generally supported alternative 4C, which was the public underpass with the park. Again, a very wide underpass with options for park or different public uses on either side. These were some early sketches. There at the bottom left, you see the North Plaza area, showing a kind of, well, a ramp that's not too bad. Doesn't include switchbacks. So we kind of like this ramp configuration. And then in the middle there's opportunity for other plaza or area that may be programmed with the Children's Discovery Museum. And then on the south side, the bottom right exhibit here shows steps, but also a fairly substantial ramp, which allows a lot of green space and opportunity for other park type activities, which we will develop later as we go forward with the project. Project support. Received a lot of good project support from various agencies. Primarily when we did our grant application, we would ask for letters of support from various folks. And a couple of them just want to mention is AMVETS and Mark First, both organizations that serve folks with disabilities, really support the project because of its ability to provide for these folks. Another really cool thing to me, I thought, was the elected officials in DC are US senators and US congressmen, both of them. So 4 people signed a joint letter in support of this project. You don't see that all the time. So very much bipartisan support for this project. Conceptual design, the existing conditions, you all know this, but we'd like to review it. Double track location. So we have 2 tracks here and 2 platforms that are available for service. Both of the tracks were upgraded to the highest standards by the high-speed rail project. So they're both available for service again. Second boarding platform, the south platform, and the old Amtrak station, again, are available for service by Amtrak. Detour lengths for alternative routes, about 1,000-foot detour if you're walking from Uptown Station to the south side using Broadway, and then Constitution Trail, again, detours via Linden Street. And that's about an 800-foot detour from what it was. Project goals, provide accessible passage, wanted it to be convenient and intuitive to use, offer greater capacity, certainly than the old proposed pedestrian overpass, minimize delays and adverse travel, improves mobility and connectivity, provides for economic development by providing that direct link between Uptown North and Uptown South, maximizes access to public transportation, and promotes transportation alternatives to disadvantaged groups. And then very important, reestablishes that direct route for the trail rather than taking a detour. And finally, improves safety. Talk about safety a little bit. Really the primary way this avoids provide safety is by avoiding conflicts with trains. So any at-grade crossing, there's a threat of folks trespassing and doing other things that they shouldn't be doing, and a great sense of urgency and danger at these crossings. We also have what I call the two train issue. We don't see this a lot. We see it on occasion where two trains are actually occupying the tracks here by Uptown Station. So you can see if someone thinks one train is cleared, there may be another train. There are warning devices put up, but folks can always get around warning devices and not hear warning devices. So that's been a big concern of ours. This project will provide direct Amtrak connectivity for the platforms for everyone that needs to use the south platform as well as the north platform. And it really, again, minimizes the pedestrian trespass on the railroad right-of-way. You may have seen these pictures before. This was taken at another crossing in Normal, but this shows pedestrian trespass at its worst or most dangerous. So again, these are students at ISU crossing a train that's been stopped. So you see them going over and under, which is always a dangerous, very dangerous situation, no matter which route they take. And then add that to the circumstance that there may be another train coming on the other track, that just compounded. So we really want to minimize the potential for this type of a situation. Other kind of more technical design parameters for this project. The structure that we build has to be able to support train and track loading, and this is dictated by the host railroad, the Union Pacific. Again, to provide for some of the goals we listed previously, we want a wide, unrestricted cross section. So we're proposing 20-foot by 10-foot height for this underpass for bikes and pedestrians, and provides for required side clearances. Some vehicles may be allowed because of the height to pass through here. I don't think it's designed for your roadway vehicles, but the tram that that Amtrak operates, or the trams, they operate several trams, could certainly roll through here, as well as many of the parks and recreation vehicles that are on the trail. We wanted to minimize the depth of the structure, so the distance from the bottom of the tunnel to the top of the rail. And the reason we wanted to do this is so we could minimize the ramp lengths on both sides, but in particular on the north side where space is limited to put in a nice ramp. So we wanted to avoid what I would call switchbacks or turns back and forth in the ramp, because all that just makes it inconvenient and less accessible to use. Other design considerations for our team, constructability, of course. Whatever we propose, we need to be able to construct it. Construction risk always for the railroad as well as our contractors. Costs, of course, are always a consideration on any project. Long-term maintenance, durability is certainly part of that. Impact to railroad operations, primarily during construction and other site restrictions and conflicts, which this site is fairly compact, so have those restrictions to consider. Public outreach, again, I wanted to talk a little bit about this. We tried something new. We actually prepared a video that we'll show here in a bit if we can make it work. And then at the end of that, we had a little survey that we can continue with that as we proceed with the designs in the future if we have specific questions to ask of the public. But in this case, we sort of just asked about the use of the project, and majority of the folks that we surveyed are Normal residents. We asked them how they would potentially use the underpass, and they could mark more than one answer. So 90% said they would use it as pedestrians, 70% as cyclists, 50% as Amtrak passengers, and 20% as Connect Transit passengers. a majority of the respondents were in favor of adding amenities to the space. So art or other amenities like the parks we talked about, or other programmed uses, they were in favor of. This sort of surprised us as far as accessibility. Nearly 10% of the respondents or other family members use a mobility assistance device. So again, that just kind of reinforced that mobility and accessibility is an important parameter for this project. So if you haven't seen this video, we'd like to kind of show this again. It really gives a good, gives a couple fly-throughs or ride-throughs of the underpass, kind of gives you a great perspective of that. So it's a good kind of demonstration of the conceptual design.
Increased trains and speeds have raised safety concerns with the current at-grade crossings at Linden and Broadway, which require pedestrians and cyclists to walk or ride directly across the railroad tracks. The success of the Uptown Revitalization Initiative has greatly increased the number of pedestrians and cyclists near the train tracks. A grade-separated crossing, such as an underpass, provides an option in which pedestrians and bicyclists would never be in conflict with an oncoming train. In 2019, the Uptown Connector project was selected for a federal Build Transportation Discretionary Grant, and Normal will be awarded $13 million in funds to complete the design and construction of the underpass. The Uptown Connector will expand the economic success of Normal's central business district by providing connectivity and serving potential development in Uptown South, affording urban residents and rural neighbors with enhanced regional transportation options, and providing STEAM education opportunities in science, technology, engineering, art, and math through an innovative partnership with the local Children's Discovery Museum. Through past public engagement initiatives in 2017, over 70% of participants favored the recommended underpass alternative, which will provide a safe crossing undeterred by rail traffic, reduce delays and adverse travel, improve connectivity, safety, and accessibility for pedestrians, bicyclists, and Amtrak passengers, and maximize access to public transportation overall, including for disadvantaged groups. The Uptown Connector will provide a direct link between developments on the north and south side of the rail tracks. This iconic facility will be functional, convenient to use, and aesthetically compatible with other developments in Uptown, including the new accessible park space. The Town of Normal is the project sponsor and the Build Grant awardee, and has a proven track record of engaging its local partners to meet the needs and requirements of all stakeholders. Delivering projects that benefit our community is vital to regional growth. The Town of Normal and Uptown Connector project team will be conducting public outreach in the coming months. Please join us. You may also share your transportation needs by completing the Town of Normal online survey, normaluptownconnector.org.
So now a little bit more about the conceptual design of the structure. So this is the part that we really had a lot of struggle with the railroad for several years. So we looked at various options for the underpass structure, and came down to 4. We looked at others, but really looked at these 4 options: an open cut bridge, pipe roof construction, which is a more modern and perhaps risky type of construction, jack box construction, which is again a fairly risky type of construction, and then box culvert construction. So again, throughout the years from 2018 to 2020, we looked at these options with the railroad. And finally, in January of this year, 2021, the railroad did agree with us actually and selected the box culvert as the type of structure to advance to preliminary engineering. Not going to spend much time on this, but the railroad, of course, liked options that didn't interfere with freight traffic, and we weren't going to compromise on options that, again, were too deep and made the ramp lengths much longer. So ultimately, we looked at the box culvert construction. Again, this wasn't even on their list as options originally, but it provides the shortest ramp lengths and most desirable for users. This type of construction, box culvert, it's actually precast box culvert underneath the railroad tracks. So it's a very conventional type of construction. A lot of drainage structures are built this way under highways and other roads. We haven't done a lot of this in the town of Normal, although there are these types of structures around the communities. It's the quickest method available to us. It was a similar structure was completed in Dixon, California. So that helped us out in our arguments because this was under a Union Pacific Railroad tracks that this was built. So we had a lot of information from the project in Dixon, California. This type of structure has moderate construction costs and will be built one side at a time. So we'll actually keep one track open while the other track is closed, and we can build the structure on the one half. We anticipate doing this through extended closure periods, which the railroad understands. So they've allowed us some periods like long weekend closures where we can close one set of tracks and build the structure. Again, our consultant team, just a little bit about them. Again, WSP is the prime consultant, ratio architects, is landscape architects, as well as the experts on accessibility, Kaskaskia engineering, geotechnical studies and things like that. American Surveying and Engineering, the survey consultants. WSP, again, has nationwide expertise in railroad construction and coordination and all these types of structures. And they really helped out a lot because they actually worked on this project in Dixon, California that we used as an example. So it was good to have them on our team. April 1st of 2021, we finally submitted the preliminary engineering plans, which are very technical engineering plans, to the various review agencies, but primarily the Union Pacific. Union Pacific's concurrence is required before we move ahead with our build grant and phases 2 and 3 of the project. And actually, we received that concurrence on May 5th of 2021. So that was ahead of schedule for us. NEPA approval was received from the Federal Railroad Administration. They granted us a categorical exclusion on May 21st of 2021. So for these are two major aspects of the project that had to be approved before we could move into phase 2 in conformance with the feds. So those are both complete. Just wanted to show a couple of sheets of the preliminary engineering plans. These plans really show in pretty good detail where exactly like the structure is going to be. There's going to be retaining walls on both sides. Details, again, the different types of structure and retaining walls that will be built. And then in this case, a sheet showing like a cross section of one side with retaining walls and ramp there. So this is just a couple of sheets of the preliminary engineering plans, which in phase 2 actually get taken and turned into the final construction plans. Timeline, again, phase 1 has lasted from about June 2017 to April of 2021, and really with the completion of or approval of the railroad preliminary engineering plans and the NEPA process. Funding plan. This is the project estimate. This hasn't really changed too much over the years. And this includes phase 1, 2, and phase 3 of the project. So phase 2, we anticipate is 3.15 million, with phase 3 or construction and the construction services about 19.54 million, for a total project budget of 22.69 million. our sources, which have come together fairly recently, actually, all of them actually this year. Of course, the build grant through the Federal Railroad Administration. We've also had the opportunity to use what is known as Section 130 funds. These are railroad grade crossing safety funds. They're federal funds actually given to IDOT for use on projects. But because they're federal funds, the FRA had to approve them. So different agencies, including the Federal Highways Administration, got involved with this. And we were approved for 3 million of these state funds, state federal funds. So the total federal funding for this project is 16 million at this point. State and local funding, the Illinois Commerce Commission has a new source of funding from the Illinois Capital Bill, which is called Rebuild Illinois. And of this funding, they programmed $5 million for our project. And then, so this leaves Town of Normal at about 1.7, 1.69 million for our total project budget of 22.69 million. Additional funding sources, way back in the beginning, we actually had grade crossing protection funds from the ICC for the original pedestrian bridge. We didn't know if these funds would remain with the project, but the ICC staff says, yeah, they're still available if you want to use them. So what we may do in coordination with the ICC and the FRA is increase our project budget and use these funds. That would be justified because the project has been delayed. So there's some inflation that is factored in, as well as additional coordination we feel with the Union Pacific. We also want to make sure you're aware that the phase 1 investment on the project was 1.5 million. So that's in addition to the project budget that we just showed. Excuse me. As we move forward to phase 2 and phase 3, the council will expect several items to approve. Very soon, we hope to have the build grant agreement with the FRA for the council approval. That will include both the $13 million build grant as well as the $3 million of the Section 130 funds for $16 million. The phase 2 consultant, which we expect will be WSP. There will be an award of that contract with the phase 2 consultant. And we also expect a Union Pacific reimbursement agreement for their review of the project plans. As we proceed through the years, towards November of 2021 this year, we'll actually start the phase 2 of the project. September of 2022, we anticipate final designs being complete. Excuse me. November of 2022, we anticipate utility improvements, agreements, and Union Pacific construction maintenance agreement to be before the council. And then finally around December of 22, contract award for construction with the completion of the project September of 2024. I think that's it. I'm gonna start coughing a bit here, but thanks, and we're available for any questions.
So I think this is a time for questions. Wayne, that was an incredibly detailed report. Thank you. I think that gave us a good sense of where we come from on this and some past actions, and a pretty good idea of what we need to do to move forward on this. So let's take a look here.
Mayor, we still have Mr. Aldrich's presentation on the screen. Would it be convenient for us to leave that up there if council has a specific question on a particular slide, or would you prefer that we just get faces on the screen?
I think there are going to be questions on the slides, so
Okay.
I think we should leave that up.
Okay.
And I'm trying to find with that up. I'm trying to find my participants. I'm not used to doing that. Well, I'm just, oh, there it is. So first question from Mr. Nord.
Thank you. Just a question for the mayor. Do we only have 2 times to ask questions, or can I just ask a couple short ones and then wait?
I'm not going to hold those rules, but I do need us to be sensitive to the time so that we can get to our council meeting. But no, you can ask a couple of quick questions. I'm not going to hold you to that.
Okay. The estimate was from, I think, 2017. Gosh, in construction, we've seen huge increases. What happens if the project is over budget? Who makes up the difference?
Well, from our end, from the teams, we'll do several estimates in phase 2. So we're not done with estimates. Typical of larger projects and also smaller projects, but certainly larger projects. We'll do these various estimates, and then if we do get into trouble, there'll be cuts. I mean, there's opportunities to cut projects of this size. We may not like the cuts, but there's an opportunity there.
If additional dollars are needed, will it come from the town or the federal government or the state?
Well, in this case, if we go over and we can't cut the project, I have to say the town would be the lowest tranche, for that.
Okay.
Other, benefits is the type of construction we've chosen, we feel is very economical. And there are other amenities in the project budget that, that would be some of the first things we look at minimizing if costs become a factor.
Okay. And who will be managing this project? Will this be town staff? And have those dollars been included in the budget?
The dollars have been included in the budget for construction management, certainly. The town staff will be involved. It's depends on how much. I think grant administration may be the town's responsibility, at least to an extent, through our finance department and as well as some of the project team. There is management in the project budget for that can be consulted, as well as construction managements in the project budget.
Okay. Do you have an idea as who the consultant would be for the construction management? Because you had managed these before in the past, and if times line up, you're not going to be a town employee. So do we know who is going to be managing that? Will this be you coming back in, or will this be an outside party?
Not sure if it'll be me. If somebody can pay me, maybe, but I think the management typically, I think the town has to be somewhat, involved with grant management on projects, and then certainly our finance department. So, there's existing employees that are very familiar with that type of project. But that's not to say that consultants and others can't manage projects of this type. They do very commonly. So, and then you asked, WSP has been gone through a selection process. The feds allow consultants been through this selection process to be selected again for this other phases of the project. I think it's still a call of the council whether we would use WSP or another sub-consultant to them or a separate consultant to do the other management services. But a firm as such as theirs is certainly qualified.
Okay, then my last question before I hand it off is, we've been told that there's no money in the budget for the next 5 years that's been set aside for the underpass. Where's this town money going to come from?
So this money, there would have to be a council action, probably with the approval of the bill grant or maybe some separate council action that would approve the funding for the next phase of the project.
And where would that come from? Because it's not been identified as even available for the next 5 years.
Wayne, I'd like Ms. Reese to take that question.
Sure. Sure. Basically, we would include that in our upcoming budget if council gives authorization to do that. At this point, the funds would come from general fund reserves or another project perhaps that we end up delaying. The reality is we haven't identified the specific source, but at this point, we would say it would be reflected in a capital budget with council approval in an upcoming budget, and we would budget accordingly and use and transfer funds from general fund over to the capital account.
Because I had asked during the budget and during some other times this past year, money that was not being spent, and asked if it was being set aside for the underpass. The answer was always no. So, I just want to put out there that the council, the public, we have been told many times that there is no money for the next 5 years slated, planned, or anything for the underpass. So anyway, I will pass.
That is
pass
true.
the
I'll
floor.
just jump in and indicate, yeah, you have asked multiple times. I think I've always indicated that we have not incorporated funds for this project in the budget beyond phase one. That is certainly something that we would plan to do as council moves into and authorizes us to move into phase two and phase three. So that would come in a future budget. And like all of our capital projects, our capital fund is funded by transfers from the general fund.
Sure, it's just this is a luxury project, and there's a lot of high priority issues, especially with roads, sewer, water, that I deem are higher priority. That I'm going to be very vocal if we pushed off these high priority things and told the public we couldn't afford to do them when we were saving for this luxury underpass project.
I think, Mr.
Never
North,
said that.
unfair characterization. That's an issue that we will have to grasp in a future budget. You're making an assumption that that decision has already been made. That's not the case. Ms. Smith.
Also having trouble with my technical issues here. So as I understand it, the town of Normal is slated to contribute 1.69 million for if we could get back that design. Your final slide, Mr. Aldridge. So the town of Normal is slated to contribute 1.69 million for this underpass when initially the plans were for an overpass that would have been restricted to railroad passengers only. And the contribution from the state was 1.25 million and Normal would have contributed 1.25 million. Is that correct?
As I recall, that's very close to, what was taken out of that project for the pedestrian bridge, yes.
So instead of getting an overpass of one use restricted to railroad passengers only, where because the town of Normal has pursued these funding sources and grants, we're looking at a 22.69 million underpass that can be used by pedestrians, visitors, bicyclists, as well as Amtrak passengers, and the town of Normal is budgeting 1.69 million, correct?
Right.
Okay, now one of the things that has been expressed as a frustration with the original transportation center plans is there's no drop off for railroad passengers, and despite the signs on the circle, people do it. So is there a part of this design that does allow for someone to pull up to the edge and drop a passenger off with their luggage instead of having to go into the garage to do that?
Actually, the project team looked at several options for that during conceptual design, primarily on the south side because of the space that's available on the south side. So I think, we weren't ready to go to the public or to the council with these options at this point because we really didn't want to start that process. But I think in the next phases, we'll certainly begin those discussions or include those discussions because we did anticipate bus drop off as well as other pickup drop off on the south side. And actually that's kind of been a dream for years, frankly, is to have an alternate site to the south because just more accessible to transit, potentially for certain routes and things like that. So I would say those discussions, including the council's, input on that would happen throughout phase 2.
And
I would jump in. I'm sorry, Ms. Smith. I would also jump in and indicate that the potential drop-off location on the south side also benefits the Children's Discovery Museum for field trips and patrons.
okay. And could you pull up the slide that has the larger view that shows this in relationship to Linden Street to show how much is still available for other development?
What? Let's see. Was it this one or another one?
It might be it. So can you circle with the mouse?
Wayne, you actually had a slide earlier that showed,
From the FAR plan, maybe?
pardon?
From the FAR plan?
There
This
it
one?
is.
Right there.
Okay.
That works.
Okay. So in the blue, the Uptown South, how much of that is the underpass?
So really, I would say only this area here is
Wayne,
the
you're gonna have to tell
underpass.
us the cover because the color, we can't really tell what you're pointing at.
Oh, I can't. It's shaded. There's that yellow area. That's certainly underpass area. If you can see that. And then the curved green portion that comes from under the underpass, that area right around there, I would say is what I call the bowl. That's coming up out of the ground. So the rest of the area really is available for redevelopment.
Okay, got it. And as far as funding and shortfalls, you're saying that was it whichever department was offering the 1.25 million for the overpass is still indicating that those dollars are available possibly for contingency in case of cost overruns?
Yes, I mean, that's, we found out, fairly recently, the funds were still available. And our, we're going to come from it that we have to get this approved by the FRA, but they actually suggested, inflationary factors as well as coordination with the railroad as good legitimate reasons to add that to the project cost. So inflation, over the 2 years that we were coordinating with the railroad, certainly a legitimate explanation.
And that 1.25 is through the Illinois Commerce Commission, that
Yes.
1.25 million.
Right.
Thank you. And what are the deadlines for using these dollars that have been awarded to Normal for this construction?
I think, I don't have the exact numbers and we'll see those with the agreements, but I think from the Fed's perspective and the state as well, as long as we're moving forward with spending those dollars, there's not a real, deadline looming on us. So that would be something I actually haven't seen in some of the agreements yet, but we'll see that in the agreements.
And just for the record, there's been a lot of interpretation of the memo of understanding with Union Pacific. Is the town of Normal, in fact, required to provide other than an at-grade crossing at the station?
I would say yes at this point by the MOU, but I mean, we're well far along with this project. So as soon as we start agreeing to the build grant document, things like that, that's what really sets the stage for, you're going to build an underpass. The other, the ICC also will prepare an order. And that order will actually say there will be an underpass here. So we'll be bound ultimately by the ICC order.
Okay, so it's,
Right now, I would say it's a gentleman's agreement because of the MOU, but that's certainly direction there all the agencies have been headed.
so doing nothing is not an option.
In my opinion, because of the stakeholders that we're involved with, I would say doing nothing is not I can't say it's not an option, but it's not a good option.
Okay, thank you.
I will interject that given the amount of staff work, the work done at the state, work done in federal agencies, the work done by our 4 legislators, 2 congressmen and 2 senators, that would be disastrous for us to take a path of do nothing. Ms. Smith. I'm sorry, Ms. Cummings.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have a question because I know I looked during the presentation at the multiple grant applications we have done, and I know it showed that there were quite a few that we did not get, and I don't know if there was was just trying to find out, were there adjustments made to what we initially put out as it relates to the project that made it change, or were there other circumstances that kind of helped us stand out when we finally got the final build grant on May 5th of this year?
From my standpoint, I'm not sure there was any major changes in the scope of what we proposed for the project once we got out of we decided we wanted to build an underpass. I think as far as the grant applications, they were fairly consistent. And I don't know if Courtney, you have an opinion of that. You were involved with the grant applications, but we did improve the grant applications as we went along. There's always an opportunity to get a review of the grant application with the feds, and we did that as much as we could. So I think that really improved our chances. And actually the final grant application, they said, leave the grant application alone. It's good. Your justifications are all there. They had some comments about the benefit cost analysis that was performed that really kind of show more of your math, actually show more of your work. And we did that, and that resulted in the build grant of 2019. So I think to answer your question, I think the main reason for the work as shown in the grant applications was consistent.
Well, if I could just add, the applications ranked high in all accounts. So we consistently received favorable reviews. I think a big factor was competition. Some of the cities we were going up against. So it just hit at the right time in the 2019 application.
Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you. And then my last question is surrounding when we talk about the different construction, or I won't say construction, but the different designs, that's better. The different designs on average in a project like this, how many designs could possibly come forward to the council before we get to the final design? And I know that, there's been now some stir brought up about having sufficient costs. Can you walk through just how, when we do and go through those design processes, the design thought is also with the budget that we have, that we know that we have in mind?
So it's not often with a town project that we go through this many options, just because, there's so many different options for railroad construction, and we really wanted to try to fulfill their goals as fulfill our goals. So really most structures for a highway bridge or something like that, we try to be very efficient. So in some cases we don't make a lot of choice. We'll go to a structural engineer, and it'll be a box culvert type of construction, which is a common construction for our type structures here in town. Very rarely will we go with a bridge type structure, but those are oftentimes, appropriate if you're spanning a long distance. So in this case, out of all these types of construction, I would say the one we chose actually fulfills our design intent, but it's also the most economical to build. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's always, kind of in the back of our minds as engineers and designers to build the most efficient and cost-effective structure.
Thank you.
Mr. Nord.
Thank you. In the event this is built and the structure starts cracking and, needing work, or at some point it's going to need to be replaced, who's responsible for those costs?
That will be indicated in the agreement, the construction and maintenance agreement. So typically, and I can't say what's going to be in that, but typically the railroad will probably ask the town to be the maintainer of the structure. I can say that the railroad standards as well as the town standards are going to be to build a very durable structure and to require the highest quality assurance of any manufacturers, that fabricate these structures. So these structures, and again, Courtney or Rick, you can correct me, I think their lifespan is anticipated. Well, just tell me what you think. You guys are the experts on a railroad structure. What's the anticipated lifespan for that?
Yeah, typically 75 to 100 years. I mean, and there might be some, interim maintenance that you might have to do before you have to completely replace it. But I guess one of the things is that once you have a hole in the ground like this, it's a lot easier to come back in and replace it than to do the original construction where you have to, there's probably a way to do it, 75 to 100 years from now, when our great grandchildren are enjoying the structure, to shore it up, and you might even be able to do it half at a time, where you could have some kind of temporary use through a restricted portion and kind of do it half at a time. The 20-foot width really helps out in that regard. If we were building the bare minimum, when it had to replace, you'd probably have to shut it down and detour people around. But I think the type of structure here is time-tested. The railroad has their engineering standards that we have to adhere to, and it's a proven product that has stood the test of time in other locations.
I just might add anecdotally that if you go a little bit to the west of this, between the Vernon between Fell Avenue and University Street, there's a railroad bridge that's been in that location since the early 1920s, and it's still going strong. So just to reinforce what you just said about the lifespan of these projects.
I will point out that, I'm sorry, there was a slide that Mr. Aldrich showed that showed a timeline. On that timeline, it indicated a maintenance and construction agreement with with Union Pacific. And what we're talking about is what Mr. Aldrich mentioned would be included in that agreement, and it would come back to council.
Okay, yeah, because this is going to be, if it's for the train and the railroad, those trains run rain or snow, even in sub-zero weather. So there's going to be a lot of maintenance that staff have to do to keep snow and ice so it's still usable during the inclement weather. We're not like California, where we don't have to worry about snow in the freezing weather.
In that vein, Mr. Nord, could you tell me why this structure is different than the other railroad structures in town that don't need that kind of maintenance?
Oh, sure. If I was a railroad engineer, I would, but this is not, this is a box culvert that we're building. And one of the slides showed that we're building it on subpar soil, and it has to be undercut and refilled in, so we've got a soil stabilization issue as well with this. And I'm sure the engineers kind of see that, but you know, if you want me to talk in detail about bridge construction, I'm not qualified.
But you,
Um,
then you've made a very strong assumption that this is going to be a high maintenance project.
For
is
snow,
that
ice
just,
removal, that's something that I think we can all speak to. We all live in
I would
in
think
Illinois
that
where we've got 4 seasons.
right. We certainly will take all that under consideration. We do a pretty good job of snow and ice removal in Uptown on the sidewalks, and we would take our obligation seriously. So when we talk with the Union Pacific Railroad and we put something in writing, we'll bring that back to council, because certainly the primary focus of this structure is safety and accessibility.
Yes.
And we certainly will never forget that.
And also the MOU, I just want to make sure that everyone's clear on this. I've got it in front of me. It says in it, plain English, the parties agree that this MOU is not intended to create any legally binding obligations on any party. So, you know, even though this might be a gentleman's agreement, this is not legally binding. So if we decide not to fund this, can the railroad still build the overpass that they had originally proposed? Is that still a possibility?
I can't talk for the railroad or the other agency.
Okay.
I really can't. It is a desire, you know, I can tell you that all these agencies are, you know, really want this project to happen.
Yeah, and the MOU says that the MOU was intended to facilitate discussions regarding general areas of cooperation, which is where we're at now. And I went back and I reviewed the previous council discussion on this. Even some of the council members, when they were speaking, they said that there was no guarantee that the underpass would still be built. This was just to proceed things along to see if it could and where we would be. So I would encourage council members to review that, because some of the folks are still on council. Now, if we do an underpass, in light that there's increased rail traffic coming through, and you do want to make this a safety corridor, you know, if we move it to Linden, then vehicles can get under it as well. You know, so ambulance, fire trucks, police, you know, EMS can actually use it. So maybe we can save lives of folks that, you know, are not just on bikes or walking, similar to how Springfield has done it. Now we have the luxury of looking to see how other folks in Illinois have accomplished things and actually go look, touch, and see. So that's where I'm at with this. And thank you for your presentation. Oh, one last question. Whenever this came up in our 2-on-1 meetings, I'd asked if we were going to get more input from the public and what the public knows, so we can hear from them, because that's who we represent and this is their money we'd be spending. Is the town going to go out and seek more public input before we make a decision?
Mr. Aldrich, I think your timeline when we talked about phase 2, there was, I think the website is still open in terms of normaluptownconnector.com and taking feedback. And I'm not sure if we can fit in or where we fit in public conversations with folks.
Okay, well,
we still have to design, and I'm sorry to interrupt. We still have the amenities to design and what the landscape architect art, things like that. So there's lots of room for thought sharing in that process.
Okay, I had put something out on Facebook shortly after I learned that this was coming to council, and I let you know in that 2-on-1 meeting, and I gave the town the opportunity to put something out first that I would share, and the town didn't. But I put a question on Facebook asking folks if they felt that the underpass was a high enough priority to undertake now, considering everything else that's out there. And overwhelmingly, well, I also had them put what town they lived in. So whether there's Bloomington, Normal, wherever. Overwhelmingly, the answer was no, it was not a priority. So for the folks whose money we will be spending, you know, all the money coming from the state, federal, and local level, it's all coming out of taxpayer pockets. They overwhelmingly said no. So I see this something similar to the Coliseum, where our constituents said no. And, you know, I think it would be disingenuous and, you know, not look very good on elected representatives to kind of go a different route. Thank you.
So, Mr. Nord, I'm going to respond to that. In your call to the public, you asked specifically for people to contact me, and I did receive one email. I received one email, and I will point out that in your narrative, when you're asking for public input, and I won't go into the details, was fraught. I'm telling you, fraught with misinformation and bad numbers.
Well,
And we're going to leave it at that right now.
then I would recommend the town put something out, maybe add something to the water bill. And just a questionnaire. It goes out to every resident.
Mr. Nord, you've had your say on that. I responded to it. We'll go on to Ms. Lorenz.
Thank you. Mr. Aldridge, could you go back to slide number 30? So this is phase 1 timeline. And when was it that was it basically in like the spring, February, March, April, that the council approved or accepted the results of the alternative analysis that selected one of the underpasses as the preferred choice?
Yeah, it looks like here, yeah, June of 2017.
June of 2017. Okay. So April was that open house. I remember that.
Yeah.
And then shortly after okay. And about that time, we also committed 1.4 or 1.5 million dollars to this entire phase 1. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. There's been times that Mr. Nord has asked, you know, and others have asked if there's been additional dollars spent on phase 1. Is the 1.5, 1.4, 1.5 a pretty comprehensive number?
Yeah, it includes most, you know, the WSP work. It includes some railroad review work, you know, which we owe them money to review the plans by agreement. Some other consultant survey work, I think, is in there as well. Okay. You know, there is support work, you know, done by other, like, for example, Cardinal Infrastructure. They provide, you know, support work out in DC for this and other projects, you know, that the town does. So, sure. I mean, there's other, you know, funding that's, you could say, is associated with the project, but really 1.5 is the fees to WSP and other consultants.
Okay. So from here, I guess I'm wondering, and I'm not sure who can answer this. Who all from council was involved in any of the phase 1 portion that involved seeking grants? Was anybody from council involved in that?
I'm not sure what you mean. Staff worked with WSP for the grant application process.
Okay,
and
so somebody from council helped with the grant part.
No, Mayor executed, I think, some grant applications for us.
Okay. Okay. So we never really saw any of the grants before they were submitted, right?
I can't answer that. That was Mr. Peterson was the city manager at the time, so I would guess the grant application probably was not directly shared with council. Mm-hmm. It's a very lengthy document, so I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, you know, I guess I come back to slide 30 because this has been a long and protracted process. I think Mr. Aldridge said 2017 to just a few months ago. And I think I recall when we were talking about this in 2017 that it was supposed to be like a year and a half or 2 years. Is that about right? What we thought it was going to be?
I would say it was probably anticipated to be 2 years.
About 2 years. So it
Yeah.
ended up being really 4 years. And I know that when I've inquired about it, particularly on some of those grants that we weren't successful on, I just kind of got, sort of some like, oh, well, we really don't know kind of thing. So the commitment, I guess, to this alternative was pretty vague, to Mr. Nord's point of the MOU, non-binding, non-legally binding, until we opened up a present one day from the build grant for $13 million. Is that a fair statement?
I would not call that a present. I would call that a grant award.
Okay. Well, it seemed like a surprise to me, because I wasn't really aware that of the cadence of the different grants that were being written. And so, I want to just make note of the fact that this has been a long process. And in hindsight, I wished I had known and more about the cadence of the grants and what was being said, plus and minus about them. This is a big, once in 100 year, 75 or 100 year project. And I feel like I've gotten more updates from grants being submitted for West College Avenue than I have on this one. I just want to put that out there as a criticism, constructive, I hope, that we learn from that as we go forward and maybe learn to leverage grants more, that you keep this and future councils more apprised of of that. Would be one piece that I'd like to leave here in this discussion, because as I look at slide 30, there was a lot of months and years that we really didn't have any information shared with us, or at least with me. So that's one thing. Now I will say, however, that this is a project that I personally have struggled with, because from an engineering point of view, it's fascinating. I'm just so intrigued by the different designs and so forth, and how you ended up with the box culvert, and this will be a really cool engineering feat. You also outlined some other positives as well. The safety, mobility issues. But I have just struggled fundamentally since 2015 that the government is telling people how to cross a railroad track. And so for that reason, I have a hard time getting excited for spending $22 million on going over, under, around, whatever. So I have struggled with spending $22 million on this project. And that would be another constructive criticism, that I feel like there's still time to make up on that, because obviously we still have some more decisions to make and approve. I would like to know very much more about the hard reasons to spend $22 million of anybody's money, federal, state, or local, on this project. I think about $22 million would go a long way on West College, and then some. It would go a long way on mental health, on public transit, on water mains, on hiring more people. So this is a big dollar amount that I'm struggling with. So those are my two negatives. I will finish on a positive. This train has left the station. This thing is happening, I believe, because we got $13 million lined up and another 6 to boot. So it's happening. And why is it happening? It's happening because in strategic session after strategic session, a majority of the councils in 2018 and again in 2019, which I was not a part of that majority, but told staff, yes, this is a priority. And so staff did what council told them by majority rules. And as you can tell from my first two comments, you can tell I was in the minority. But staff moved forward on our majority rules guidance. And so we got to wrap our head around it. And we got to look at the economic benefit. And we got to look at the jobs, the 400 jobs that it'll create, not to mention the phenomenal number of construction jobs that will occur, a huge project for our building and trades experts in this community. So I am trying to embrace this project for all of its merits. However, I felt compelled to share my criticisms, not because we can undo them. Maybe we can improve going forward, but I really do hope that going forward we can learn some lessons. Thanks.
Not to sound argumentative, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but a lot of people watching may not be, that probably with the exception of the $1.69 million of local match, none of the dollars that were granted to the town for this project are usable for anything other than this project. I think it's important to note that these dollars come with very specific guidelines, and we applied for very specific guidelines. And again, I'm not trying to argue with you, but I think people need to understand, the general public needs to understand that these dollars are not to be used at our discretion, but have very, very tight constraints.
Fair point. And I should clarify that when I was saying that, I was just talking not about redirecting the grant dollars by any means, because I understand the stipulations of grants, but just thinking about $22 million. What could we do? You know, and the government's telling me I got to spend it on how to cross a railroad track. That's the fundamental issue I have. So.
Well, actually, they're only telling us that we've got to spend them on the railroad track underpass because that's what we asked for. And that was the parameters of the grant. Let's see, Ms. Smith. You're on mute, Ms. Smith.
As someone who was, when I was running for office, someone pointed out to me that the town had been awarded all the dollars it needed for the overpass and turned it down. And I was like, well, that was new information to me. And so I have been a student of this overpass and underpass project to get a handle on how it had happened and how it evolved. And to me, it is phenomenal that we're going from a project where it would have been a restricted access overpass limited to rail passengers only to get from one platform to another, to now have a project that has amenities and is accessible and can be used by pedestrians, passengers, wheelchairs, because let me tell you, there's nothing worse than getting a wheelchair stuck in a railroad track when you're trying to cross it and you don't hit it at a perpendicular angle and somehow mess it up. So I think the town of Normal will have a wonderful central attraction when this is complete. And I can tell you from someone who uses rail a lot, because I've stopped at stations in Ottumwa, Iowa, Charlottesville, Virginia, Charlotte, North Carolina, the train stations in New York, Philadelphia, Denver. I know which communities are putting money into their rail stations. And I remember when 9/11 hit and planes were grounded for more than a week. and the rental car agencies were flooded at the airports with people begging to get out. And they ran out of rental cars. Trains, rail passenger planes still ran. When COVID hit, if you wanted to have the ability to travel without being enclosed in a capsule with finite air circulation, rails continued to operate. Sleeper cars gave you even more ability to isolate yourself. It's a viable transportation alternative. It's one that I think many passengers are looking forward to having full service restored. And having this project completed is something that I look forward to seeing.
So
Thank
I,
you.
I don't want us to get far afield here tonight and have the debate on the feasibility of going forward with that project. If council decides to switch gears, there are going to be opportunities in future council meetings to do that. I don't sense that, so don't do that. I think I know where everyone stands, but let's try and keep the conversation to what we were presented tonight. Again, there'll be plenty of opportunity going forward to have these broader discussions, and we've had them in the past, and that's what set us on this path. Ms. Cummings?
Thank you, Mayor. With that being said, I don't want to get too far into it because, you know, my scare is we walk away from here and the public is not well informed, but I will move from here. I would like to say thank you certainly to the staff. As for me, it is slightly personal to see us finally bring home the Bill grant. I kind of took it upon myself to be involved, not directly with the grant process, but in opportunities that I had to advocate for our city in DC, typically while I was doing advocacy work also with the National League of Cities, typically in a March, probably since I've been on council. I use that time to also speak with our legislators, if not their teams, to talk about our project and ask for them to continue to stick with us in the support of this project. After a while, it got to a point, many legislators, not only just ours locally, I was able to speak with other legislators like Robin Kelly, Jan Chakowski, Mike Bost about our project to really get our project out in front of other legislators within the state of Illinois as well. So it is such to me at this point to see us bring home that Bill grant, which I do know is very, very highly competitive. And, you know, to know that those dollars came back here and to also share with those watching tonight who may not know about these types of grants. They are looking for a very special or unique, if you will, type of project that's going to take place. And so for ours to be chosen as seen as that, they don't take your regular random everyday road projects and throw these types of dollars at it. They give them to projects at the level in which we present it with this connector. I want to make sure I say it right, the Uptown Connector project. So I'm just honored to see us bring that build home. I was also in DC with the One Voice when we got denied. I believe it was one of the Chrissy grants. So to be at this stage, it is an honor. And I hope people really take a look at it and look at it from a broader perspective. The underpass is becoming actually a symbol. An underpass is a way for pedestrians to connect, not just, you know, in our case, it's a railroad, but it could be a roadway, and it's to remove barriers and blockages. And I believe if we are able to successfully move forward with more support, we will finally move away from the blockages and the barriers that have hindered or is hindering us from continuing to move forward in the town of Normal and do the things that make us more diverse, progressive, and growing as a community. So I would love to see our growth continue and us do our best for the future.
I think I'm going to wrap up the discussion on this. If there is more, we can certainly reconvene or do it in 2-on-1s or talk to each other. We do have two public commenters tonight, and I want to give them a chance to make comments before we adjourn this work session. Again, kudos to staff, Wayne, and all the people that helped you with this presentation tonight. It certainly gave us a detailed overview of where we're at and where we're going and some milestones going forward. So thank you for all the hard work that you have put on this, Pam. I won't do an Oscar award acceptance and go down a list of everybody involved, but a lot of people and staff were involved. And so thank you. Thank you
Thanks,
for
Mayor.
the work you did on this. Our first public commenter tonight is Ron Ulmer. So Mr. Ulmer, if you are here. Ron, are you with us? I don't see him. Our second public, oh, there, Ron, you're there, but he is on the call, but he is not responding. I will go to our other public commenter, Mike Rakes. Mike, if you want to come on in and we'll take your public comment.
Okay, Mayor, can you hear me?
Gotcha.
Okay, Mayor, thank you very much. Staff, council, thank you very much for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Mike Rakes. I am the president of the McLean County Building Trades, which we're made up of a couple thousand construction workers, such as electricians, plumbers, pipe fitters, laborers, carpenters, operating engineers, sheet metal workers, teamsters, cement masons, concrete finishers, heat and frost insulators, and iron workers. So I think I hit them all. Anyways, this Uptown project, the underpass, it'd be beneficial for all the trades. Like was discussed on the meeting earlier, it's gonna create hundreds of good paying construction jobs, and with a long-term outlook, it'll open up opportunities to create new businesses and other opportunities. So that being said, do recommend, and the McLean County Building and Construction Trades does support the Uptown Connector project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mike. And Mr. Ulmer, Ron, are you with us? Because
Maybe I sent him a request to unmute himself.
Mayor, did you hear that? I think Mr. Ulmer, if Mayor, if you could mention to Mr. Ulmer that he's muted, maybe he can unmute his phone.
Mr. Ulmer, are you there and coming in? You may be on mute. I'm going to call for adjourn. We're going to adjourn this work session. Ron, if you can hear this, staff, maybe we can reach out, given the way this worked, if Mr. Ulmer would like to make his public comment at the beginning of the regular meeting of the council, I think that would be appropriate. I know he wishes to speak tonight, so we'll give him that opportunity. So at that point, we are adjourned at 6:50. We'll see you back here at 7 o'clock. Thank you.
now.
Thank you. Call to order a meeting for the Normal Town Council for Monday, June 7th, 2021. Please call the roll.
Mayor Kus,
Here.
Mr. McCarthy, Ms. Cummings,
Here.
Mr. Nord,
Here.
Ms. Smith,
Here,
Mrs. Lorenz,
Here.
Mr. Preston,
Here.
We'll begin with a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The governor has issued a disaster declaration related to the public health concerns caused by the statewide COVID-19 pandemic. As mayor, I have determined that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent because of the risk of exposure to the COVID-19 virus stemming from an indoor gathering, and that the remote meeting is in the best interest of the health, safety, and welfare of the council, staff, and general public. And I will add that hopefully that is the last time I read that statement, and we will, with the governor's likely announcement that June 11th, we'll go into phase 5. We will be back in person in council chambers. I'm going to give Mr. Ulmer another chance, if he is with us, to make public comment. Do we have Mr. Ulmer on the call? I do not see him logged in.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Ulmer was on the call. Vasu, can you? I'm sorry, go ahead, Vasu.
Sorry, I'm on the phone with Mr. Ulmer. I'm walking him through. Give us just a couple of minutes. Mayor Cruz, it's going to take a little bit. I think you guys should go ahead with your actions.
Do we want to, Mayor, did you hear Ms. Gadaraju? It's going to take a little while to get Mr. Ulmer hooked up and ready to speak. So we can either move forward and have him at the end, or we can wait. Oh, Mayor, you're muted.
What I was saying was we'll take him at the end of the meeting. We need to get moving on this meeting. We move to the omnibus agenda. Right, items considered routine and will be handled with the one vote unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion. And let me get my participants list up. Mr. Nord.
Thank you. I'd like to pull item B as in boy, D as in David, and E as in echo.
Motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Items considered on the omnibus tonight are approval of the minutes of the special council meeting of May 17th, 2021, and approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting of May 17th, 2021. A resolution to accept the bid and approve a contract with Core Construction in the amount of $31,000 for the Lucky Climber IDNR Public Museums Grant Project. Resolution to award the proposal for boiler replacement at the water treatment plant to Mahoney Mechanical at a total cost of $34,500. And a resolution to award the bid for roof replacement at 4 well houses and the West Booster Station to Western Waterproofing for a total cost of $129,066.43. Please call the roll.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye, sorry.
that's okay. Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye, those items are approved. Item B is a report to receive and file town of normal expenditures for payment as of June 2nd, 2021. Mr. Nord?
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Nord?
Thank you. In the expenses under administration, city manager, general expense, there's several property tax bills on there that we've paid. I've brought this up, gosh, since before I was elected, so over the past, over 2 years. These properties, some of these properties are, or at least one of them is a, well, during the time whenever the taxes accrued, was a retail store. And another is a political campaign office that taxpayers are paying taxes on to subsidize the campaign office. Or actually, I take it back. We're not campaigning the campaign office. We're paying tax on a office where our government officials are doing actual government work. So this should, in all effect, be a tax exempt property. Also, the Sprague Street, there's 305 or 303, 305 Pine Street. This is a retail store where the town rents the property. It also has a residence on there for $120 a year. Taxpayers also pay to mow the grass and do snow removal. We clean the windows for $120 a year. And we also pay property tax on top of this because it's for profit. So this is an extreme loss for taxpayers. I've pleaded for a review of our properties because taxpayers should know, well, the council should know if the property is purchased for government use or if it's purchased for an investment, and then the taxes need to be applied for. We either pay tax if it's investment or not if it's for government use. And I've talked with the tax assessor, the supervisor of tax assessor's office, and they say that decision lies with the town as to whether the property is taxable or not taxable. This is not something we can say, well, you know, the state decides that, because the state does not decide it. The town of Normal decides it. So I just wanted to put that out there, that this is yet another year gone by where we don't know what these properties are for. And I think it's, you know, just poor management that this continues.
Mr. Nord, we've had this discussion many times. Ms. Reese, has anything changed since the last time we had this discussion?
No, Mr. Mayor, I'll ask legal counsel to provide counsel with a written memorandum on the subject since it does keep coming up. We've talked to the assessor's office as well, so we'll certainly provide counsel with a memorandum on this topic.
Thank you. Mr. Nord, do you have any other bills that you wish to talk about?
Yes, when you speak with the assessor's office, when we write, I guess, our rental contracts.
Mr. Nord, I'm closing out on that issue, and do you have another bill you want to talk about?
Sure. There's also an expense for ICMA renewal. This is for the City Managers Association renewal. So a question I have, should we expect that with this payment that the ICMA Code of Ethics would be expected to be applied and used?
Mr. Nord, the issue at hand is a question of the bill, not whether or not there's a compliance with the code of ethics. We're here to talk about the bill. If you have an issue with the bill, you could raise that issue. We're not talking about code of ethics.
Well, do we pay for that? Is that a reasonable expectation that we should get when we pay for this membership? Yes or no?
Mayor, if I respectfully, if I could respond to that. Mr. Nord, I don't know where you're going with this, and I've asked council and you specifically in the past, if you have concerns with my ethics, I would ask that we go into executive session to discuss that. In regard to membership with the International and City County Management Association, with membership, there is an obligation that members comply with the code of ethics. All former city managers for the town, as well as myself, my entire tenure with the town. My assistant city manager, Mr. Hansen, is also a member. All of us in this profession have been members of ICMA. And frankly, as I've shared with you and council members, I serve on a professional conduct committee for the Illinois City Management Association, and it is our responsibility to help our members make sure we effectively comply with the code of ethics. So yes, as a member of ICMA, there is an obligatory code of ethics, of which I'm very proud to have complied with. However, if council has a concern regarding my ethics and my professional conduct, I ask that we move into executive session to discuss, because this is, that would certainly be a major concern.
Okay, good. Thank you.
If we're not moving into executive session, if there's no concern, I would like to hear that as well, rather than leave it out there that there's an ethical concern. So,
well, I think
can we have that clarification, please? Because this is not the first time it's come up.
I think the issue's been raised a number of times. We will schedule an executive session at the next meeting when we're in person to discuss this issue and other.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Any other bill issues there, Mr. Nord?
No, just the taxes and then the ICMA.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. The item is approved. Item D is a resolution authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Bloomington, the County of McLean, and McLean County Soil and Water Conservation District for the administration and implementation of watershed management programs. Mr. Nord?
Thank you. I so move.
Second.
Mr. Nord?
Thank you. With this, who is responsible for deciding on the maintenance for the watershed waterways?
Well, Mr. Nord, I'm going to ask Mr. Aldrich to turn his camera off. I believe you're talking about some communication we've had in the past regarding creek bed maintenance and creek right-of-way. Mr. Aldrich, would you like to respond?
This agreement is specific to the watershed north of town, so the Lake Evergreen and Lake Bloomington watershed. So similar people are involved, you know, as we talk about the stream and creek banks and detention basins within town. But this is specific to the Lake Bloomington and Lake Evergreen watershed as far as this IGA is concerned.
Okay, well, hopefully the similar people or the folks are watching, because the maintenance that we've got on some of our creeks here in town have generated complaints of excess mosquitoes, because in some areas, this isn't throughout all of the watershed system. The town's not mowing it. So sometimes the grasses are 6 foot tall, if not taller. I've sent pictures before. We've had constituents email things, and I just wanted to get that on the record, because when it rains it backs up, mosquitoes come out, and then any of the rodents that are living in there, they come out because they're being flooded out. And this is specifically along Sugar Creek area, and then a branch that goes just north of it. We've had complaints right from Tawanda Avenue, east and west, to Blair.
Point of order, this is not germane to the agenda.
If it's a health issue, then hopefully the people that are watching will look. And I know that there's been complaints filed with the Department of Health as well. Thank you.
Further discussion on this item? Please call the roll.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. Item E is a resolution authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Bloomington and McLean County for cost sharing for the community Dropbox recycling program. Mr. Nord.
I so move.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Nord.
The reason I pulled this is because whenever the Dropbox came before the council years ago, when it was going to be done away with, it was being done away with as a cost saving, as a cost savings measure. That's what the public was told. That's what the council was told. And then in order so everybody could have recycling, the landlord ordinance was adopted. So all landlords had to provide recycling. And this is something we've heard quite a bit about here over the years. And now everyone in town has got recycling at their homes. And this service was supposed to go away. Instead of it going away, like we communicated with the public, we tried to get other taxing bodies to help fund it, so it remained. And we had a county council member on here at our last council meeting saying that how did he phrase it? That they were threatened, possibly withheld the 1% sales tax funding. And, that's just not something that I'm proud of to be a part of. We told the public this was going to go away. It's not going away. Instead, in normal, we're taxing folks a third. The county is taxing the same people a third. Some of the folks that live in the county, they're already paying for recycling service at their locale. They may have drop boxes in their town, or they have it picked up at the curb. Yet now they're subsidizing town and normal drop box locations. This was never going to cause recycling to go away. All this was doing was just moving the drop-off location somewhere else, or letting the vendor pay for it, as the taxpayers were told was going to happen. So, this is just, it hurts the credibility when we tell taxpayers we're going to do one thing and then we turn around and do something else. So, we wonder why people don't trust government. This is a very good example of why we should have let this end. And then if we wanted to start it up again, then start it up again anew, but not continue it. So for this reason, I'm not voting in favor of this. Thank you.
Mayor, just one clarification, if I could jump in. Back in 2018, we did talk with the city council, the elected body at that time, and discussed canceling the Dropbox program. The city council as a body decided to continue the program. So there's been no smoke and mirrors, no saying that to the taxpayers we're going to do one thing and then doing something else. This has all been public conversation, a public decision by the elected body, and a budgeted process in terms of continuing a service. And then when we came to council in January of 2021, council authorized a new Dropbox recycling program contract with Midwest Fiber. Majority of the council supported it, but it was contingent to continue the program. It was contingent on cost sharing with our governmental partners, the city and the county. So the item before council tonight is this cost sharing agreement so that the program can continue.
Thank you, Ms. Reese. You said most of what I was going to say, but I do want to add that there has never been a threat from this council to withhold shared dollars that we share to the county for mental health. That county board member was mistaken in that. That has never been said by anybody on this council, talked about online or offline for this council. I think it's also important to note that this is an agreement that requires the county and the city of Bloomington and the town of Normal to approve, and the county and the city have already approved their portion of the agreement. And Ms. Smith.
Yes, and rather than go back as far as Councilmember Nord has on this discussion topic, I believe the gentleman who spoke to us at the last council meeting was complaining not about having the program, but feeling the pressure to approve the cost sharing at 1/3 of the cost, despite the support provided in the Ecology Action Center's analysis of the users of these drop box. But I will defer to Ms. Lorenz, as I think she may have spoken to the gentleman directly to plumb his thoughts on why he was so concerned about feeling threatened. I just know that the drop boxes are used, that the materials going into the drop boxes are not going to our landfill. Our planet is a finite resource, and if we can recycle goods, I'm in favor of doing that. Thank you.
Mayor, you're muted.
Ms. Lorenz, I'm trying to cut out the thunder in the background.
Yeah, it is thundering over here. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I will clarify. I did speak with Mr. Soldner, and he was not aware that the IGA was written such that if it did not get approval from all of the stakeholders, that the program was dropped. He had heard that that was the case, that if it wasn't approved by the county, that it would be dropped, and he had interpreted that to be a threat. I told him that it was actually in the IGA, and he said he wasn't aware of that. So I think that dispels that rumor of threat. But that's really not what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk more about the merits of the issue. I think we've got an opportunity here with how it's been structured, and it's been structured, I think, in a really good way, that, we move forward with this. We've got everybody on board. We move forward with this, but we continue to monitor it. And if I interpret it correctly, within the next year, Ecology Action Center is going to do some more study on usage. And, if in another year, it's not looking like it's making sense, there appears to be an out clause from any one of the parties too, a 90-day notice. So I think that's a good structure. And, I'm glad that we're going to try to get this one across the finish line, at least for now. So, but, continue to monitor and continue to evaluate it. I mean, you do always have to look at these programs that, that have been going on for a while. This one is 40 some years, and, you have to wonder and question, are these legacy programs still valid? And so we've structured it in a way to continue that assessment. So I think that's good. Thanks.
Mr. Preston.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I did not vote in favor of this when it came to us at the beginning of the year, that being that we didn't have an IGA in place at that time, and I didn't want the entirety of the expense to fall on the people of Normal, and I'm glad to see that this is coming back to us in a way where that is not the case. And as a result, under this agreement, I do support what's being presented to us tonight. I'm not sure if Mr. Brown from the Ecology Action Center is with us this evening or not. And if not, if there was any staff that may be able to answer a question for me. After the first year of this IGA, the cost sharing between the county, the city, and the town will be determined proportionally based on usage and user surveys in terms of the Ecology Action Center trying to figure out who is utilizing the service and which of those three, if any of the three, they live in. How does that process work? I mean, like, I want a little more detail as to how the determination will be made after year one on the cost sharing split between the three local governments.
You're on mute too, Pam.
Thank you. I will start to respond and I'll ask Mr. Aldrich to supplement. The cost sharing for years 2 and 3 will be determined following another survey, which will be conducted by the Ecology Action Center. The Ecology Action Center conducted a survey a while back, which is why we're using them to do a second survey. They look to do that probably sometime this fall. And I do want to mention Mr. Brown was not invited to participate in this conversation tonight. If we invited him, I'm sure he would have been on the call, but
yeah, of course.
So Ecology Action Center will do another survey this fall. They will determine who the customers are, and we will use that breakdown to determine year 2 contract cost share. And the same thing for year 3. They'll do another survey and we'll do that for year 3. What we haven't talked about in detail is that some of the Dropbox locations may be relocated. And one specifically will quickly be relocated from Normal to the Walmart site on Route 9. So the West Side Walmart in Bloomington. And we believe that once that relocation occurs, the customers that will be using that will primarily be city or county customers, and that might modify the ratio of city, county, and town. And so Ecology Action Center will take that into consideration and look at a survey this fall and see who's using it. Mr. Aldrich, anything you want to supplement?
Not really, but we do have to get that completed fairly quickly. The move to the West Market location. I know I talked to Mr. Shoemaker just yesterday, and so it'll be a team effort. We'll be working with, the city, the county, and Midwest Fiber, as well as Ecology Action Center to get that completed. There could be another location that's modified. We don't know yet. But that is one change we want to make to open up a location at the West Market Walmart.
Okay, thanks. And I froze due to, I think I lost my internet connection there for a sec, Ms. Reese, during part of your answer. So excuse me if you did already include this in your answer a minute ago, but the survey from the Ecology Action Center will be sent out to residents like in the mail or email, or would it actually be targeting users?
Their survey was conducted by being present at the site and actually interviewing people that were using it.
Yeah,
they will do the same.
Thanks.
Quick question, which current site are we relocating to the West Side Walmart?
Mr. Aldrich?
I think the lowest use is actually Chittix. So we'll have to consider that, but that's based on the usage. I think it would be Chittix.
Thank you. Further on the item? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
No.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. The item is approved. That concludes our omnibus agenda. There are no general orders or new business tonight. Before going to concerns or adjournment, Ms. Gadaraju, do we have Mr. Ulmer to make comment?
Yes, Mayor, please. Mr. Ulmer, can you try and unmute yourself? Mayor Hughes, today Mr. Elmer is having a real difficult time with this. So I asked him if he cannot join, and I asked him to send his comments in writing.
All right,
Okay.
thank you. Concerns or comments before adjournment? Mr. Norton.
Thank you. My concerns have to do with communicating with citizens. I don't believe that we're doing a good job communicating with our constituents. Some examples, we had the Citizen Summit, and with the Citizen Summit, we only invited, I guess, elite invitees. Those were the folks that we said we were going to use their info. Anybody else that showed up, we weren't going to use it. And, you know, that put a bad taste in the public's mouth. I think it did not encourage open, honest communication between the citizens and their elected representatives. Also, One Normal Plaza, last year, there was a large group of residents out there that wanted to speak with their elected representatives about an issue that was coming before us. And, you know, town staff urged us not to speak with our constituents. You know, they even put forth legal reasoning why we shouldn't. You know, we are elected representatives. We're not a body that adjudicates like the, you know, other bodies. These are our citizens. Again, it did not encourage open communication between citizens and their elected representatives. Then recently, we've been told that businesses and folks that are bringing stuff before us, we shouldn't be speaking directly with them. We learn about things that are coming before us the Friday, possibly the Thursday night before this council meeting. By then, everything is public, and we should be able to reach out if we have questions and want to speak to these businesses or these constituents that are bringing things before us. But you know, I was chastised because I did that, and legal reasoning or a legal opinion was put out because of that. Again, this does not encourage open communication between elected representatives and their constituents. I spoke about the ICMA. In Tenet 9 of the ICMA, I recommend people to go look at it. It says that we should keep the community informed on local government affairs, encourage communication between citizens and all local government officers, and emphasize friendly and courteous service to the public and seek to improve the quality and image of public service. Well, when we discourage communication between elected representatives and their constituents, you know, we are not improving the image of public service. So, you know, this is something that I think we should work on. And I hope that with the underpass, this is something that the community wants to speak. They want to have a voice in how their money is being spent. I think we should open it up and invite the public to come and talk with us. You know, not just on Thursday, they find out that or on Friday morning, they find out that that following Monday, we're going to be voting. Put it out there, let the citizens know. I think that is the least we can do. And I think we owe it to the people that pay for all of this government. So thank you and have a good weekend, or have a good week.
Mr. Nord, I just want to correct one thing on your reference to the One Normal Plaza meeting. That was a meeting organized not by the town, and there was that was organized by residents at the city or at that location. And actually, you were in attendance and appeared to be one of the organizers of the meeting. Ms. Cummings and I did attend the meeting to listen and to talk, but because there were 3 council members there, it would be a violation of an Open Meetings Act to all three of us being there. So Ms. Cummings opted to leave the meeting to be in honor of the Open Meetings Act. And you and I were at that meeting, and I spoke at that meeting, and I talked to a number of residents at that meeting. I just wanted to be clear on that.
Well, I also want to be clear that what I'm speaking about is not just that one meeting. They had many meetings. There were some meetings that the town staff were at
Mr.
that
Nord,
they wanted council to be at. So it's not just the one meeting. Please do not just limit it to that one meeting. They reached out to every one of us.
do you always interrupt people, Mr. Nord? Is that your method? You
I
have
waited.
the floor and we listen to you, but I do not have that same privilege.
Well, you made it a discussion, and I waited for you to finish, and I thought you were finished. So I apologize if you were not.
Thank you. We're not going to debate this back and forth, but I just wanted to be clear that we were at that meeting. Ms. Lorenz.
Okay, I'm going to go in a different direction. I've got three things. I'm going to use the sandwich approach of a positive, and then maybe a criticism. No, not a criticism, that's too strong, but maybe a more of a concern, and then of another positive. Positive number one, Mr. Aldridge, you gave a phenomenal presentation during our work session. You stepped us through a very long and complicated and maybe even muddy, we haven't even broken ground, process. So I want to thank you for the time that you put into that, maybe other staff members, City Manager Reese, for compiling in 30 some slides, a very, very accurate picture of a very complicated project, and a really, really good delivery of it. So thank you, Mr. Aldridge. And turning your camera on there, thank you. Okay, now here's my maybe a little bit more of concern. It's not a criticism. It's maybe something we could do better. I am concerned about maybe we need a little stronger guidelines on signage in our uptown merchant areas. There's a newer business that's gone in there. Great to have a new business come in and rent an available property. So I have no problems with the business itself. But I know that some of the merchants who went to the length of buying, a more boutique-y looking sign and, refrain from a lot of neon signage, to try to keep with the look of the neighborhood. That's not being followed by this newer business, and there's a concern. And I bring this up in part because there is a lot of investment, taxpayer dollars, through the TIF district and other incentives and so forth. And it's paying off, right? It's a vibrant place. Uptown is. Gosh, go there on Saturday. There was hardly a place on the circle to find a spot to listen to some music that was going on. So it is a jewel. The merchants are proud of their neighborhood. The merchants are concerned about what appears to be maybe a signage that they would not have picked for themselves. And so maybe we ought to look at the sign ordinances and guidelines, and maybe tighten those up a little bit. So that's my maybe more negative comment. My positive that I want to end on has to do with the Corn Belters. I heard I guess he was general manager of the Corn Belters. They're part of a newer ownership that took over shortly, I think, before the pandemic. They are doing some amazing things out at the Corn Crib with the Corn Belters. Got a couple of leagues going on there, lots of home games. For $8, I can walk in, get a ticket. I plan on doing it. I'd encourage others to take a look, or maybe another look if you haven't in a while, to our Corn Belters and have some good time. Some of the nights are all you can eat from the concession stand. So what the heck, go have dinner out there and enjoy some young, prospective, and up and coming talented baseball. So that's my positive. Thanks.
Play ball.
Play ball, yeah.
Yes. got back from traveling last week, and it's a real quilt in various states and various businesses about compliance issues. And so if you could provide some update on what the policy will be on masks and when that's expected. I know I went into a doctor's office today and was told that they're waiting for the hospitals to guide them. So I understand that medical facilities might have a different guideline, but to your knowledge, Ms. Reese, are all of the Town of Normal city offices and the library, will they all be following the same mandate once the governor's order is issued and we're in phase 5?
Well, I can respond briefly, if okay, Mayor, if I respond to this question. I would say generally, that's generally true. In our public buildings, we are going with the bridge program right now and Restore Illinois Phase 5, where masks will be voluntary or recommended if you're unvaccinated. The unique places will be the Children's Discovery Museum and possibly the library in terms of the children and what the CDC and IDPH regulations will be in that regard. And we will be following what the schools do for that. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Preston.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just, along the same theme, I think, of Ms. Smith there, I would like to take the opportunity to acknowledge that this is likely and hopefully our last Zoom council meeting, and give a shout out to staff and certainly our INT staff and Vasu and your division for keeping us running during these council meetings. And I'm sure it's a lot to manage with public comment and sometimes technologically questionable council members at times who, either forget to unmute or, can't find this button or that I think our INT department has run these Zoom meetings incredibly efficiently and effectively, and in a way that makes it easily followed along online with our constituents, which is ultimately the important thing, to make sure that we're continuing to provide transparency. So I welcome the opportunity to safely get back in person, and assuming that we do that for our next meeting and thereafter, didn't want us to end this one without thanking staff for all that they've done this last year plus.
We've covered new ground. I've covered new ground tonight in a Zoom meeting because I reminded Ms. Reese that she was muted while I was muted. But
Mayor,
she's a lip reader. Yeah. Yes.
I'm sorry, before you close out the comments section, I just wanted to mention, respond to communicating with residents and with citizens. And to be clear for anyone who's watching this, this broadcast, the town's website, which is www.normal.org, has information about all 7 Town of Normal elected officials, including phone numbers. So any citizen or any resident can contact City Council at any time. Their phone numbers are available on our website. You can call city offices and we'll forward citizens' phone numbers to you, or we'll certainly share council's phone numbers with them if they choose to call you directly. Obviously, there's email, but we also have public comment at meetings as well. So we will continue to enhance our citizen engagement opportunities, of course. But I did want to share that for those that might feel like we are prohibiting communication with council or prohibiting communication between council and residents, there's quite a few opportunities for citizens and residents to call you, for you to call them. We'll make sure we get phone numbers to the right people. And we always encourage people to sign up for public comment if they have something they would like to share with you.
Thank you. Mr. Nord, I see your hand up, but just recall that the council did agree that we get one round of comment and council comments. So I'm going to call for adjournment.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
No.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye, we are adjourned. Thank you.